Then Shephatiah, the son of Mattan, and Gedaliah, the son of Pashur, Michael, the son of Shelomah, Pashur, the son of Malchiah, heard the words that Jeremiah had spoken unto all the people, saying, Thus saith the Lord, He that remaineth in this city shall die by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence. But he that goeth forth to the Chaldeans shall live, for he shall have his life for a prey, and shall live. Thus saith the Lord, This city shall surely be given into the hand of the king of Babylon's army, which shall take it. Therefore the princes said unto the king, We beseech thee, let this man be put to death, for thus he weakeneth the hands of the men of war that remain in this city, and the hands of all the people, in speaking such words unto them. For this man seeketh not the welfare of this people, but the hurt. Then Zedekiah the king said, Behold, he is in your hand, for the king is not he that can do anything against you. Then took they Jeremiah, and cast him into the dungeon of Malchiah, son of Amalek, that was in the court of the prison. And they let down Jeremiah with cords, and in the dungeon there was no water, but mire. So Jeremiah sunk in the mire. Now when Ebed-melech, the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs, which was in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah in the dungeon, the king then sitting in the gate of Benjamin, Ebed-melech went forth out of the king's house, and spake unto the king, saying, My lord the king, these men have done evil in all that they have done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they have cast into the dungeon, and he is like to die for hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city. Then the king commanded Ebed-melech the Ethiopian, saying, Take from thence 30 men with thee, and take up Jeremiah the prophet out of the dungeon before he die. So Ebed-melech took the men with him, and went into the house of the king under the treasury, and took thence old cast clouts and old rotten rags, and let them down by cords into the dungeon to Jeremiah. And Ebed-melech the Ethiopian said unto Jeremiah, Put now these old cast clouts and rotten rags under thine armholes, under the cords. And Jeremiah did so. So they drew up Jeremiah with cords, and took him up out of the dungeon. And Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. Then Zedekiah the king sent, and took Jeremiah the prophet unto him into the third entry that is in the house of the Lord. And the king said unto Jeremiah, I will ask thee a thing, hide nothing from me. Then Jeremiah said unto Zedekiah, If I declare it unto thee, wilt thou not surely put me to death? And if I give thee counsel, wilt thou not hearken unto me? So Zedekiah the king sware secretly unto Jeremiah, saying, As the Lord liveth, that made us this soul, I will not put thee to death, neither will I give thee into the hand of these men that seek thy life. Then said Jeremiah unto Zedekiah, Thus saith the Lord, the God of hosts, the God of Israel, If thou wilt assuredly go forth unto the king of Babylon's princes, then thy soul shall live, and this city shall not be burned with fire, and thou shalt live, and thine house. But if thou wilt not go forth to the king of Babylon's princes, then shall this city be given into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and thou shalt not escape out of their hand. Zedekiah the king said unto Jeremiah, I am afraid of the Jews that are fallen to the Chaldeans, lest they deliver me into their hand, and they mock me. But Jeremiah said, They shall not deliver thee, Obey, I beseech thee, the voice of the Lord, which I speak unto thee. So it shall be well unto thee, and thy soul shall live. But if thou refuse to go forth, this is the word that the Lord hath showed me. And behold, all the women that are left in the king of Judah's house shall be brought forth to the king of Babylon's princes, and those women shall say, Thy friends have set thee on, and have prevailed against thee. Thy feet are sunk in the mire, and they are turned away back. So shall they bring out all thy wives and thy children to the Chaldeans, and thou shalt not escape out of their hand, but shall be taken by the hand of the king of Babylon, and thou shalt cause this city to be burned with fire. May God let his blessing to the reading of his word. Let's sing together the hymn 135, based on the 135th Psalm. Hymn 135, Praise ye the Lord, exalt his name. Reading now from the book of the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 39, verse 1. Jeremiah, chapter 39, and verse 1. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his army against Jerusalem, and they besieged it. So began the 30-month siege. All the days and the months and the years are given to weaken the city, to create starvation within, to weaken the troops. The city that was so confident it could outlast a siege and defend itself would fall. And as we proceed in verse 2, in the 11th year, the last year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month, the 9th day of the month, the city was broken up, and all the princes of the king of Babylon came in and sat in the middle gate. And there are all the Babylonian names now in command in the city. In the middle gate, half the city was occupied, the other half then gradually and inevitably cleared of all danger. And in verse 4, we'll just read these passages to begin with. And it came to pass that when Zedekiah the king of Judah saw them, and all the men of war, the Israelite soldiers, then they fled, and went forth out of the city by night, by the way of the king's garden, by the gate betwixt the two walls. And he went out, Zedekiah, the way of the plain. The Chaldeans' army pursued after them. They went by night, but they were soon spotted, and it overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. And when they had taken him, they brought him up to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to Riblah, in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him, treated him as a criminal because he'd broken his oath of allegiance to the Chaldean king. And so the full details of this are reproduced in chapter 52, verses 4 to 8, and later in the chapter at great length. And this is just a summary here in this position in chapter 39. But you read of how the children of Zedekiah were taken. The sons of Zedekiah must all have been, I should imagine, under 12, because he was only 32 when this took place. And his wives, because he had multiple wives, and all were taken. And he, well, he kept his life, but his eyes were put out, and he was captive in Babylon for the remainder of his life. So Jerusalem fell in accordance with the prophecy of Jeremiah and other prophecies before that. It fell. The people had been warned repeatedly, but they hadn't listened. They'd been given an opportunity to repent and return to the true worship and abandon their idolatry, but they refused. Zedekiah had been warned repeatedly, right up to the 11th hour, and the prophecies had been laid out before him. If you defect to the Chaldeans and renew your oath, you'll be preserved alive and the city will be preserved. But if you fail to, if the Chaldeans take this city, they will destroy it. You will keep your life, the prophecy says, but you'll lose everything else, and the city will be lost, and the nation state will lose its status. And that is exactly what took place and what happened. But in these chapters, we can proceed quite quickly through these chapters this evening. We'll see some remarkable things which have ongoing lessons for God's people in every age. And I'm just going to go down to chapter 39 and verse 5. I've read it already. The Chaldean army pursued after them and overtook Zedekiah. In verses 6 to 7 of chapter 39, there is the summary of his punishment, elaborated on later in the book. Verse 7, he put out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with chains to carry him to Babylon. And then in verse 10, the most intriguing thing, but Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, left off the poor of the people which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. So the poverty-stricken in the city were actually given territories in the land nearby. And Nebuchadnezzar showed much more compassion as a Chaldean prince than their own rulers had done on them. In this chapter 39, verses 15 and so on, are a flashback to an earlier thing. I'm going to pass over them and go to chapter 40 and the first verses in the chapter. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord after the captain of the guard, Nebuchadnezzar, had let him go from Ramah when he had taken him being bound in chains. And Jeremiah prophesies once the city has fallen. But look at the action of the captain of the guard, verse 2. He took Jeremiah and said unto him, The Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place. The Chaldeans knew it. They knew all about Jeremiah's ministry. They rehearsed to him his own predictions. Verse 3, Now the Lord hath bought it, and done according as he hath said, because ye have sinned against the Lord, and have not obeyed his voice. Therefore this thing is come upon you. And now, behold, verse 4, I loose thee this day from the chains which are upon thine hand. So, Jeremiah, we're told earlier, is to be released by order of Nebuchadnezzar, who knows he's a prophet, who knows he's been urging the people to yield, and who is now specifically delivered from the general judgment and result of the fall of Jerusalem. And the captain of the guard gives him a choice. If it seem good unto thee to come with me into Babylon, come, and I will look well unto thee. But if it seem ill unto thee to come with me into Babylon, forbear. Behold, all the land is before thee. Jeremiah is given free passage. Wherever he wishes to go, whatever he wants to do. Of course, really, he's not terribly free. He can't go where there is nothing and where there is nobody. He's got to choose either between defecting to the Chaldeans and going to Babylon himself, or going with the remnant that remains in the land. And in verse 5, Now while he was not yet gone back, he said, Go back also to Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, whom the king of Babylon hath made governor over the cities of Judah. So Gedaliah is going to be governor over all the Israelites that remain in the towns and villages in Judah around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is destroyed. It's uninhabitable. But a governor is appointed. And it's interesting, the basis of this appointment must be that Gedaliah had obeyed Jeremiah. He'd gone to Babylon. He'd defected to the Chaldeans. He'd rallied many of his own people and ordered them, and this is possibly his reward. He's not a prince in Judah. He's not of royal blood. He's not a descendant of David. but he's given from Nebuchadnezzar control over the land of Judah as governor on his behalf. So the captain of the guard, into verse 5, gave Jeremiah victuals, provisions, and a reward, whatever that might be, and let him go. And Jeremiah went unto Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, to Mizpah, the city which he made his headquarters, a comparatively small but central place. And then, verse 7, when all the captains of the forces which were in the fields, the defeated Israelites, the straggling remnant of men left all over the place, even they and their men heard that the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah the son of Ahikam governor in the land, and had committed unto him men and women and children, and of the poor of the land, and of them that were not carried away to Babylon, then they all rallied to Gedaliah, also to Mizpah. And the notes are given of who gathered together. And verse 9 and 10 are the details of how Gedaliah told them the terms of his rule and what they must do, and they were free to farm the land and to do whatever they wished. But there was going to be an enormous problem, and we come to it very soon. Now, perhaps I can go down to verse 12 of chapter 40. Even all the Jews returned out of all places whither they were driven, came to the land of Judah to Gedaliah unto Mizpah, and gathered wine and summer fruits very much. But listen to this, chapter 40, verse 13. Moreover, Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the captains of the forces that were in the fields, came to Gedaliah to Mizpah, and said unto him, this is Johanan, dost thou certainly know that Barrett, the king of the Ammonites, hath sent Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, to slay thee? But Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, believed them not. Now, this is very interesting. The Ammonites, who still evidently felt that Babylon could be brought down, and that there ought to be a proper liaison between Judah and Moab, and Ammon, and all the smaller states in the region, and that Nebuchadnezzar ought to be resisted, was so furious that a governor over Judah had been appointed, that he arranged for this man Ishmael to go and assassinate him. What Ishmael was promised, I don't know. Some significant place in among the Ammonites. He shouldn't have cooperated with them. It was a grossly wrong thing for him to do, but he did. But there's more to this, you know, because this Ishmael was of royal blood. He was a minor royal. He was related to Zedekiah the king. He was in the line of David, and one wonders whether not only was he being put up to this by the king of the Ammonites, but he himself was bitter and jealous that Gedaliah, a non-royal, somebody who had no place, not even a prince of Judah, should be appointed to this role. A very capable man, and a godly man, and a good man, Gedaliah, but that cut no ice with Ishmael, and he possibly was jealous of him also. But this plot seems to be well known. Johanan says to Gedaliah, don't you know about this? That's the way it's put in the record. Haven't you heard about this? And Gedaliah doesn't believe him. Now that's very puzzling. Why not? And Ishmael comes, and somehow Johanan isn't there. He's told, and I will show mercies upon you, in verse 13. But if ye say, we will not dwell in this land, know that neither obey the voice of the Lord your God. We will go into the land of Egypt. That'll be much better for us. There'll be peace there and plenty to eat. If that's what you decide, verse 15, now hear the word of the Lord, ye remnant of Judah, because Egypt will in fact be destroyed, and the king of Babylon will lay it waste, and you shall die there. So don't go into Egypt. This is, of course, exactly what happened. This is a matter of history, the fall of Egypt to Babylon. And so Jeremiah gives them every opportunity to settle in the land. Verse 19. He repeats himself. The Lord hath said concerning you, O ye remnant of Judah, go ye not into Egypt. Know certainly that I have admonished you this day. For ye dissembled in your hearts. Jeremiah actually knows it. Perhaps as he gave his message, their faces were angry and they didn't want to listen. So even before he's finished repeating God's message to them, he's saying, ye dissembled, you put on a show, is the meaning of the term in this context. You put on a show when you came and you said all these things about your obedience. When you said you'd listen and you do it. Verse 21, and now I have declared this day, I have this day declared it to you, but ye have not obeyed the voice of the Lord your God. Before they say anything, their faces surely betray it. Now you'll certainly die, because you refused the word of the Lord. And that's what takes place. Of course, they should have known that they should never have gone to Egypt. Way back in the time of Moses, that's made very clear. Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse 16. Return to Egypt, historically at any time, is absolutely forbidden. Not so much longer before, Isaiah made a very lengthy prophecy not to go to Egypt. They mustn't do that. And we have an equivalent. Don't turn to the world for help. You're the Church of Jesus Christ. Don't borrow the world's music, the world's methods, the world's devices. Don't do it. It's the modern equivalent of going down to Egypt for help. Anyway, they're not going to listen to Jeremiah in spite of their big words. And mind you, we can do that today. I know churches that do this. They use a lot of slogans. They say, come and listen to us. And they're Bible believers. Come and listen to us. We give you the word good and strong and faithful and true and apply it correctly. They like to speak up, talk up their ministers. And yet there's all kinds of things where they just will not obey the word. And they fool themselves, just as these people were doing. Strong undertakings of obedience and loyalty. But as soon as the message comes, we're not listening to that. It wasn't the one they wanted. So they refuse it. And we have to make sure we don't fall into the same kind of trap. Just look down to some of the things we read here. Chapter 44 I'll go to, and verse 15. The chapter 43 gives the terrible reply, and we could examine it at length. Then I'll go to chapter 44, verse 15, first of all. Then all the men which knew that their wives had burned incense unto other gods, and all the women that stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwelt in the land of Egypt, they've moved now, they've disobeyed Jeremiah, they've gone to Egypt. Of course, he's had to go with them. They've taken him as well. They're in Pathros. They answered Jeremiah, saying, as for the word that thou hast spoken unto us in the name of the Lord, we will not hearken unto thee. They've already said, we don't believe you're an authentic prophet. But we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth. And we're going to go on burning incense unto the Queen of Heaven and worshipping our idols and pour out our drink offerings to her as we've done in the past. And this is the reason, end of verse 17. For then had we plenty of victuals and were well and saw no evil. So it's the pragmatic form of argument, using the term in a philosophical sense. We'll do what works for us. We're not interested in your words, your message, your teaching. We'll do what works for us. While we were idolaters, we had prosperity. Of course, it's nonsense reasoning because they didn't have it. The Chaldeans were likely to strike at any time. They were in great fear and insecurity. But that's not how they choose to see it when they justify themselves. They say, while we were engaging in idolatry, everything went very well, and we were fine. So they talk their way into their point of view, the pragmatic form of argument. And that's what even Bible believers often use. It's a tragedy. The pragmatic form of argument. You say this is not biblical, this is not right, we shouldn't do this or that, but it works for us. Or so they imagine. Or so they think it does. Of course it doesn't. It'll bring things into disrepair, as it did these people. What an argument to use. When we were idolaters, we were well off. Look at them. They're now in Egypt. They've lost their capital, they've lost their cities, they can't stay in their country, so they think, and they fled to Egypt, of all places. And they're saying, well, before all this happened, we were all right. So what we were doing was not offensive. It was a reasonable thing to do. They can't reason straight. And this pragmatic form of argument fogs the reasoning. And we see it even today, but I won't go into all that. We have occasion to speak a bit of. Look at chapter 44, verse 23. Because ye have burned incense, says Jeremiah, because ye have sinned against the Lord and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, nor walked in his law, nor in his statutes, nor in his testimonies, therefore this evil is happened unto you as this day. And then there is the great prediction which follows concerning the destruction of Egypt also. Let me just take you back for a moment to chapter 43 and verse 2. There's a little word which I passed over. In opposing Jeremiah, then spake Azariah, the son of Hoshea, Jehanan, the son of Kareah, and all the proud men, saying unto Jeremiah, thou speakest falsely. The proud men. That's an interesting little term. All the proud men. That Hebrew word, here translated proud, comes from the verb to seethe. To seethe. A special kind of pride. Somebody who gets very angry and resentful if corrected. He resents correction. He resents the challenge of God. He resents instruction. He wants what he wants. It's a branch of pride. And pride blocks the reason, denies the authority of God, denied Jeremiah, who is a proven prophet. Everything he said has come to pass. Generates endless excuses, self-justification. It grows and grows. And these are proud men. And that's why they react as they do. They're not going to be corrected. So I'm going on to chapter 45. And we'll just look at this chapter and I'll start to come to conclusion. The word that Jeremiah the prophet spake unto Barrett, the son of Neriah, when he had written these words in a book at the mouth of Jeremiah, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, saying. Now this is here another kind of flashback. This goes way back to 605 BC, and it speaks of Barrett. And Barrett was the scribe who wrote out all the prophecies of Jeremiah. All his messages, everything he said, was written out by Barrett. But this has a terrible effect upon Barrett. He's a godly man, we believe. Verse 2, there's a message for him. Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, unto thee, O Barrett. Thou didst say, woe is me now, for the Lord hath added grief to my sorrow. I fainted in my sighing, and I find no rest. What is all this about? Well, evidently, in even taking down the prophecies of Jeremiah, that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, the land is going to fall, the people will continue obdurate and disobedient up to the bitter end. In taking all this down, he's overwhelmed. And he's plunged into deep despair and depression. And he doesn't want to believe it. Well, that's kind of understandable. It's also dismal. The people have so sinned. And he's the person who has to write it all down. But here's the message of God to him, verse 4 of chapter 45. Thus shalt thou say unto him, the Lord said thus, behold, that which I have built will I break down, and that which I have planted I will pluck up, even this whole land. Well, Barrett knew that. That's what he'd written down at great length, all the prophecies of Jeremiah. But it is as though the Lord is saying to him, how dare you be crushed, or dismayed, or unhappy? It might be a terrible message because the people have sinned, but it is my will. This is the climax of centuries of patience with the disobedient people. I have given this word, so you do not have to recoil from it. But then there's another reason why Barrett didn't care for this message, even though he was a godly man, and was so depressed by it. Because it turns out that even though he was a good man, there was in his heart a desire for something for himself. As if he said, I am Barrett. I am the scribe of all the prophecies of Jeremiah. This will make me important. This gives me status and station. This makes me significant. But nobody wants to listen to these prophecies. Jeremiah was the most unpopular man in the land. With the king, with the princes, only a few people faithful to him. Everybody's, and that means they're rejecting me too. I am his scribe. I am his recorder, his writer. And that's not what he wanted. Look at the rest of the chapter, this last verse, verse 5. And seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not. So God reproves him. Because although he's a good man, he was rather looking forward to being very significant and being appreciated for all his toils. For behold, I will bring evil upon all flesh, said the Lord. But he does make a promise to Barrett. But thy life will I give unto thee for a prey in all places whither thou goest. Wherever you are, whatever happens, whoever's against you, I will preserve you and keep you. But that's not an inconsiderable promise. But what an interesting word. Seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not. Pride. We have our biggest battle with pride. Somebody can conquer pride as a Christian when they're young. And if they're not watchful, it'll come back with a vengeance when they're older. Sometimes it's the other way round. Pride and something for me strikes much more in youth. Maybe we get control of it as we get older. And we put the Lord first and his priorities. But pride will strike, and if Satan can, he wants every Christian man or woman to put himself first. Something for me. My career. Well, it's a good thing, obviously, to be diligent and to work and to accomplish things. That's all good. And to be so trusted that whatever your line of business or your profession, you end up successful if the Lord can trust you with success. Then he will measure it to you. If you can keep your Christian priorities. If you can still put him first no matter what. But it's tragic for a Christian if my ambition or desire to be approved or applauded or special becomes my priority. And that seems to be what happened to Barrett. It's a terrible form of pride. ambition for me? When you're young and you're designing your career and your studies and so on, you pray to be kept in check. This is a great motto text. We can't give it to anybody when they join the church as a motto text. Obviously, that would be insensitive. That would suggest to the whole church that we think this person is in trouble and heading into trouble. But it's a very good motto text for everyone to have in the cover of their Bible, and when you've got a big decision or a big planning episode ahead of you or something like that, consult it. This is the verse, chapter 45, verse 5. Seekest thou great things for thyself, seek them not. It's very precious. It will deliver you from 10,000 snares and keep you close to the Lord to listen to this and keep your priorities right. It's so important. Ambition can cause such troubles. What comes to mind is a curious case for me to mention here on this side of the Atlantic. But in the 19th century, there was a very famous man in the United States of America who was a lawyer and a politician named Salmon Portman Chase. Any of you who studied American history, you'll know a little bit about him. Very, very handsome man, a big fellow with burning ambition. He did, in the course of his life, become US Secretary to the Treasury, and at a very important time. This doesn't really concern us here, but he was the man who brought in the paper money system into America. They never had it properly organized on a federal scale before he did it. And he was the man who made all the regulations all those years ago for the banks when they were rapidly being created. But early on, a little bit early on in his life, when he was in his late 40s, I believe, he stood for president and he was beaten to the Republican nomination by Abraham Lincoln. So to give you some idea when he was, and after Abraham Lincoln was elected president, he probably brought him into his cabinet. So he was an interesting man because his father was a very well-to-do farmer who had a huge house, like a mansion. It was yellow in colour. And all the people used to say that there were more brains born into that house than any other in the state, in the region. So his family were clever people. His father actually went bankrupt because he went into a great industrial investment which went wrong for various reasons. But he was a godly man. And they said he was such a nice chap, the father, and so godly. And the son believed himself to be a converted man also. But I can't tell you too much about it, we haven't time, apart from the fact that his father died when he was 9, and his mother had all the debts. So she farmed out all the children to relatives. There were 11 of them altogether. I think Salmon Chase, Salmon, it's an interesting name, isn't it? There's another digression on a digression, but it used to be a very popular name in America. And the L is sounding, although it's spelled the same as salmon, so it's a fishy name. However, it's a sort of truncated version of Solomon, which comes from the Hebrew for peace. Where was I? Anyway, what happened was that he was farmed out to an uncle who was an Episcopalian bishop. But he was a man who was determined that children had to be trained hard. So he worked all hours, swatting, studying, had to work on the family farm, stood and all this kind of thing. And he believed in this, a man of iron discipline, never swore even as a youngster, always kept the Lord's Day. They say he could recite all books of the Bible, because all he read was the Bible on the Lord's Day, did all his intensive study, went to Dartmouth College, very famous in America, as you know, became a lawyer, did the whole lawyer's course in half the usual time. Intense ambition. There's lots of ambition in America in those days. Must succeed. So he took up the legal profession. And then he married. And he saw himself as a believer, but he married a lass who wasn't a believer. And this girl was very outgoing, beautiful, beautiful young woman, and everybody thought she was very, very nice. They'd been married 18 months, and she died in childbirth, but he wasn't there. He wasn't there because he'd gone to Philadelphia on legal business. The great thing in his mind was to advance, and an opportunity arose that would considerably advance him, so he went to do this legal business. And when he came back, the door was covered with black crape, the door of his mansion, which meant there was death in the house. He found his wife had died, and he found the reason was that the physicians had overbled her. They did it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, until she couldn't take any more, and she died. He knew if he'd been there, he would never have allowed that. That kind of thing could happen. But there was something else. He didn't know whether she was saved. He thought she wasn't. They'd been married 18 months, and they'd hardly ever talked about the faith. He shouldn't really have married her. But having married her, he was too busy. He had so much work. He had a huge practice. He was making a lot of money. He was taking on ever higher and higher cases and having to study for them. And when she died, he hadn't even had time to talk about the Lord. And it crushed him. It shattered him for almost 5 years before he had to have what he called a second conversion and some measure of peace. What was the trouble? Ambition. Ambition can get hold of you. Make a clever man, intensely clever man. Do foolish things, get wrong priorities, everything out of order. Curb it, dear friends. Take it in hand. The Lord is always first. Never forget that. I must close this verse. And seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not. Let's close this evening, singing together the hymn 565.